Welcome everybody to FraxCheck, your weekly Frax vibe check. I'm your host, Capital K, and thank you for tuning in to FraxCheck number 47. That's right, y'all. That is number 47, and we are very glad to have you here. And we recently switched FraxCheck to a bi-weekly cadence just so that we felt there was more time to let things proceed and progress so that we can come and report to you what has happened on chain. So moving forward, FraxCheck will be on a 2 weeks cadence. And for this specific FraxCheck, we're covering June 28th to July 11th. And also, before we jump in, please follow us on Twitter at Flywheel DeFi and on Telegram at Flywheel DeFi. And if you haven't subscribed to the Substack yet, you gotta head over to flywheeldefi.com and you can find me at 0xcapital_K. And this week, as always, I have a theme for you guys, and this one is transparency maximalism. And you'll see shortly as to why. And as always, we'll start first with the flagship product, aka the Frax stablecoin. And lo and behold, we are still at a billion supply. And that has been the case for, if you could kind of see it through this, the grayed out line here is literally maybe since end of April. So for the last 3 months, we've been flat at a billion. So now on to the next slide, we got to talk about the peg because again, this is a stable coin. For the last 2 weeks, we got as high as 1.001 and as low as 0.998. Now, we obviously can't just trust a dashboard. You got to go into the market and actually perform a swap. So here we took 100 million frax and swapped it for USDC on the most liquid pool, which is FraxBP, and that yielded us a 0.9982 exchange rate. Very happy. Remember, I always like to see a 8 or an above there, meaning 0.998 and above. 0.997 is when I start feeling like I'm paying too much to swap stable assets. So on the next slide, here is why I call this week transparency maximalism. And that is Frax just dropped the balance sheet that everyone has been waiting for, or at least all the folks over at Flywheel, definitely myself. And here we have a clean breakdown of every single asset that is backing the Frax stablecoin. That is $1 billion of assets to back this thing. And check it out on how it breaks down. I'm going to walk you through like line by line. As you know me, I love line by line itemized list just so that we can clearly see what's going on here. So, owned Frax USD. That is literally the Frax stablecoin and any stablecoin paired against that Frax stablecoin. Okay, so imagine your Frax 3CRV, your Frax BP, obviously that's in there. And then afterwards, we have our own Frax. These are just literally vanilla Frax just in the treasury. Now, after that, we have owned volatile assets. That's effectively your VLCVX, CVX, and all of the volatile assets. Then we have owned Frax FXS. These owned Frax FXS are the say Frax and FXS paired. Okay, now owned Frax volatile or Frax, the stablecoin, and all the volatile assets paired against the Frax, such as say Frax CVX, FrxETH, for example. And then owned USD are all the non-Frax stable coins that are just held in the treasury. And then we have the owned FXS volatile. This is basically just FXS and WETH. And frankly, it's kind of small. So those are effectively all of the actual assets on the balance sheet. Then we have a portion talked about lent assets. And these are assets that are, Frax is currently don't have possession of it per se, and it's currently being lent out and used across all of DeFi. And you see that totals up to be about 66.7 million. All right. Oh, I forgot to add up all of the owned assets, which is currently at 958 million, plus the 66 million, practically 67 million. Then we have another portion on the bottom that's called locked liquidity. These are effectively all the liquidity locked in the FXS gauges to earn FXS rewards. And you add up all of those things, you receive a total asset of 1,180,000,000 US dollar equivalent. Now, obviously, this value changes on the daily, but that is the number we have for the total assets. On the liabilities front, we break it down super meticulously. Just kidding. It's just one simple number, and that is the total frac supply. And that currently right now is sitting at 1,074,000,000. Okay. And the difference between the two is what yields us 105 million in what I like to call equity, but here they list it as balance. So remember, all finance and accounting stems from basically this one equation: is assets equals liability plus equity. Always and forever true. So now we have all these assets minus the liabilities, and we have the balance of 105 million. Now, all of this is to say there is now a way for you to calculate easily what the collateral ratio is. All right, so check this out. You simply take the total assets minus the locked liquidity and then divide that by the liabilities, and you will receive effectively what the current collateral ratio is. Now, that just makes it very clear where we are at relative to, well, our goal of 100%. And that is why on the next slide, we're going to talk about our collateralized ratio, which is at 94.5%. And as you can see on the chart, or for those listening, we've been pretty much flat since the end of April, beginning of May. So for the last almost 2.5 months, we've been pretty languishing around this 94.5% on our march towards that 100% that we had passed a proposal on earlier this year. On the right-hand side, we have the decentralization percent, and that is currently at 22.5%, which increased by about 100 bips since we last covered it 2 weeks ago. Not much change across these two, except for the fact that now you could go in there and look at the itemized list. Oh, another point I wanted to add before we move on is that on this list, you are able to actually go to fax.frax.finance and click on the balance sheet portion under the Frax stablecoin tab, and you can export every single asset in each of these buckets. And obviously that's what I did. And that's why I kind of knew what are kind of in these buckets. So I encourage you to do so. Check it out. You could totally see every single line item. I am beyond excited about this. I've been playing with it, not gonna lie, and I will show you guys in the next FraxCheck some things that I've kind of diced up. All right, moving on. Now we have the Frax as a liquidity product, and that is the FrxBP. Not much movement here. We're at 625 million in TVL. That's about a 60 bips bump from the last 2 weeks. So really not a lot of movement, and kind of reflected in the volume. As you can see here, for the month of July, we've only processed 1 million for the last 2 weeks. Like 1 million volume, that is like 0.2% of the total TVL. Like that is abysmal. Let's call a spade, right? And last month, we actually did not too bad. We had almost 140 million in volume for the FraxBP. So last month we did phenomenal. This month we are off to a very rocky start. All right. Now let's take a look at all of Frax's liquidity across all of the curve pools. We have FraxBP, 623 million. We have 3Pool at 301 million. Frax3 CRV at 166 million, and FraxPP at 112 million. Now, what is super cool here is that if you add up all of the Frax related pools, we are actually at 3.01x of 3Pool. I don't know if you guys remember, but we were tracking this metric for the longest time of like FraxBP flipping 3Pool, and now I feel like we've just reached this whole new, regime where this is like, it's undefeated. It has to be recognized. that now Frax is like fully integrated in the Curve ecosystem, fully. All right, now let me take a step back and talk about, actually, let me take a step back in time and talk about Sam Kazemian's very first crypto project, and that is actually IQ and IQ Wiki to be specific, and now called BrainDAO. And effectively, what IQ is the encyclopedia of all of crypto knowledge. And we actually have IQ Wiki pages of all the guests that came onto Flywheel. So if you wanted to learn a bit more about all the folks that we've had on previously, go to IQ Wiki. You can find their bio and all their information there. The good folks over at IQ Wiki works really hard to gather all of that and provides that encyclopedic knowledge for, well, anyone to access. But specifically today, I want to talk about the staking. And for IQ staking, you could actually provide a duration, just like how VECRV or VFXS, from 1 week to 4 years. And by staking, you actually get voting power, and it's 4x for 4 years, just like VECRV, and it decays linearly. So right after you kind of lock it up, it starts decaying right away on the very next block, effectively. But why would you want to do this? I have 110 reasons as to why you should do this, and that is because the current staking APR given for IQ is 110%. Okay, and right now there are only 184 stakers. This is crazy. There are 1,820 of you guys out there that are just not staking, just holding IQ on Ethereum. I really hope that if you are doing so, I wish that you are actually LPing it or putting that capital to good use. And as you can see here, there's plenty of on-chain liquidity. There's like 6.5 million in protocol owned liquidity in the FraxSwap IQ Frax pair. And additionally, another reason why you kind of want to stake is that you get to manage this 16.3 million treasury, which increased by 6% over the last 2 weeks. And this treasury is not just made up of governance token, it's actually 35% in FrxETH, 20% in CVX, and there is 1.2 million in FraxLend, right? Those are real legitimate assets that needs to be managed. And I definitely think staking IQ is there's 16.3 million reasons to do so. All right. So with that said, let's switch gears and jump back into another Frax stablecoin, or rather Frax Finance stablecoin, FrxETH. Remember, FrxETH is a stablecoin because it is simply pegged to ETH. It's still a stablecoin. Instead of pegging to US dollar, it's pegged to ETH. Now here we are at 236,091 FrxETH. That represents a 1.8% increase from 2 weeks ago. And we are just a hair away from reclaiming the all-time high. Right now, the all-time high, I believe, is like 238,000 or something like that. So we are very, very close. If we keep up the growth rate, we'll probably hit it within the next 2 weeks, or at least before July ends. Now, where are all of these FrxETH hanging out? Well, 64% of them is chilling in FrxETH, 25% is in the Curve LP, and we have 11% of FrxETH just floating in the ether. That is the monetary premium. That FrxETH is earning yield and being put to use, or simply acting as a store of value somewhere else outside of the Frax native flywheel and ecosystem. That's what we want to see. That 11% helps boost the yield for all the Curve LPs, obviously because they're not being LPs. And obviously it boosts the FrxETH because, well, they're not in the FrxETH vault. All right. Now, like I said earlier, FrxETH is a stablecoin. And with a stablecoin, we got to check the peg. So here we went to the dashboard and saw an exchange rate of 0.9991. That's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn good. But you know me, I can't just trust the dashboard. So I got to go into the market and see what we got. So when you come here and you swap 3,500 FrxETH for ETH, you receive an exchange rate of 0.9989. That is pretty damn close, and I really like to see that. Additionally, you see here that even though there is this imbalance in the pool of 33% ETH and 66% FraxETH, we're still getting a very, very competitive exchange rate. And that the pool currently has 164 million in TVL. So yeah, if you want to add this in addition to the Frax BP, Frax 3CRV, and Frax PP, you know that Frax is clearly very much integrated into the Curve ecosystem. But I do have some bad news, my friends, and that is in our market share. We actually decreased by 1.3% over the last 2 weeks, pretty much since July started. And we are at 2.3% of the total market size. And let me just run down the list just for the folks listening here. We have Lido at 74%, Coinbase wrapped ETH at 11, Rocket Pool at 8, we are at 2.3, and Stakewise at 0.9. On the 30-day change, you see that Rocket Pool is actually leading the pack at 7% 30-day change, and Lido at 6.5, Coinbase at 3.6, and we are at about 4.9. So even here, we're kind of middle of the pack. We're middling, and we're just trying to hold on to our ground here. But what shouldn't be surprising is that in the yield department, FrxETH is simply crushing it. At the snapshot at this moment, we have a 5.3% APY, but that doesn't tell the whole story. And I highly recommend and encourage you guys to go to the fax.frax.finance website and click on the FrxETH tab, where you'll get to see this cool little chart here that shows what your earnings would have been if you had put in 1,000 ETH staked for the top 4 competitors, rather the top 3 competitors to FrxETH. That is Lido Steth, Rocket Pool RETH, and Coinbase's CBETH. All right, so the chart starts on January 14th and run all the way till today, effectively year to date. And it showed that FrxETH is generating a run rate of about 6.7% APY, with the closest competitor, Steth, at 5%, and then RETH at 4.3, and then CBETH at 4.2. So just comparing the closest competitor, which is Steth, to FrxETH, FrxETH is more than 1.5x the yield of Steth. Simply no brainer. Right. And in addition, with FrxETH v2 coming out, where the decentralization concerns could be alleviated with the validator set being able to run by, well, effectively the best and most high performant validator, I think we're about to see some massive changes. All right, moving on to the last stablecoin product, and that is the FPI, which is the Frax Price Index, and this is the stablecoin pegged against the inflation rate. Here, there is 82.6 million supply of FPI, which has been pretty much stagnant here for a while, and the current inflation index is still marked at 4.1%, and the current peg of FPI is actually above by 12 basis points from the inflation mandate. The treasury is actually at $89.5 million, and 46% of that is in the convex FPI Frax pair, providing that sweet liquidity. Now, on the equity format, this is all the assets in the treasury minus the FPI liabilities. You have an excess of 4.2 million. All right, that's in case like FPI has to wind down, then all of the FPI holders are made whole, and the excess 4.2 million would effectively go to possibly FPIS. All right, and that is the last stablecoin product. We're going to quickly shift gears here to the sub protocols of the Frax Finance, well, overarching ecosystem, and that is Frax Lend. And here, Frax Lend hit a new all-time high in TVL of 242 million. We effectively recovered from the March USDC Circle fiasco. However, the borrowed is still only at 63.9 million, which is still about 20% short of where we were at the high. And our utilization rate right now is 72%. which isn't bad. We want to see this in the mid 80s, but 72 is not bad at all. Following, we have the Frax swap, which I like to coin it as the DEX no one talks about, but it puts up numbers. And what kind of numbers? Well, it has 70 million in TVL, and it facilitated 18.3 million in volume for the last 2 weeks. And that is just incredible. That is 26%. Remember earlier in this FraxCheck, like the Frax BP is barely managed to do like 20 bips. So like less than 1% of what this pool is able to do. So like I said, this is a such a great primitive for the Frax, or such a great sub protocol for the Frax ecosystem. And lastly, let's talk about some of the top swap pools, and that is the FXS Frax pair at about 11 million. A month ago, this used to be at 15 million, so we definitely saw a decline in volume here. But also, I wanted you guys to pay attention to the IQ Frax pair. If you are not staking IQ in the high IQ native staking, you should at least be LPing here to earn some good yield, and obviously some FXS rewards as well too. All right, shifting gears from all the KPIs and product update, we're going to dive into profitability. And here we're going to start off always with the convex AMO. Here we have the convex AMO, and the current grand total across all our AMOs is $848.6 million. That is comprised of the Curve AMO, which is 550 million, Liquidity AMO 67, Lending 105, and Investor $125 million. And as we mentioned the balance sheet above, you can go in there and click and see kind of where all of these assets are hanging out right now and being put to use. So quick snapshot in June, here's what it looked like. We had a profit or a loss rather of 210K in June, where the CRV rewards got us to 490K in revenue, 50K in CVX rewards, and then 40K in FXS rewards, which gives us a 580K revenue. But then the expenses for the bribes was 790K, which yielded us a loss of 210K. There's obviously some rounding math here, as you will see later, but effectively we're down 200K for the month of June. Then we have our FraxLend AMO, which has been printing. So for June, it made 92.2K in revenue. And in addition to lending out the Frax and earning that sweet real yield, we also collect liquidations. And fortunately, in June, we actually had a large chunk of liquidation, which you'll see at the end. But fortunately, in July, there were no liquidations and everybody stayed safe out there. So good job, everybody. Pat yourself on the back. And we also get revenue from FPI. So after the required expense to keep the peg, which is what's called peg increase here, we have to anything above that is what we get to keep, that goes into that balance portion that I mentioned earlier, or that equity portion. So here, if you see, the current loss is about 15.5K, but we have unclaimed rewards of up to 57.6K. So the net of that gives you 42K for the month of July so far. Again, the month is not over, so we definitely need to, that is our current buffer before we have to dip into that equity balance. All right. Here is that snapshot that I promised you. We have our June numbers with the AMO, convex AMO at 205K loss, FraxLend pulling in 92K, FraxLend liquidations 250K, which effectively offsets the convex AMO and some. And then FrxETH pulled in 200K, and FPI had a nice, just tiny blip there at 4K. So we were actually net positive in June at 341K in profit. Okay, not revenue, profit. July so far, it's been 11 days. We are hit with a pretty fat convex bill, a convex AMO bill for the bribes, and that is at 412K. FraxLend printed us a nice 46K. There are no liquidations, so good job, everybody, but hurts the bottom line regardless. And for FrxETH, we're on track to do 203K as the monthly run rate. And then for FPI, like I said earlier, it was about 42K, but that is just simply a buffer that we're going to have to pay once the end of the month comes to maintain the peg. So right now, this mid-month snapshot, we are down 120K in profitability for July. All right, guys. And I know that was a little bit longer than normal, but I absolutely had to showcase the balance sheet on the Frax stablecoin. And if you took anything out of this, FraxCheck, is go check out that balance sheet. You would not regret it. You will have a ton of fun, like I did, digging into where all of the Frax positions are. And now I would like to wish you a great rest of your week and that I will catch you next week. But make sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. Turn on that notification bell. And if you want to follow us, you can go to @FlywheelDeFi on Twitter. And if you want to join the conversation, go to @FlywheelDeFi on Telegram. And you can find me on Twitter at 0xcapital_K. And till I see you again, be safe out there. Peace.